And welcome back to the Wellness Paradox podcast. I'm so grateful that you can join us on this journey towards greater human flourishing. As always, I'm your host, Michael Stack, an exercise physiologist by training and a health entrepreneur and a health educator by trade. And I'm fascinated by a phenomena I call the wellness paradox. This paradox, as I view it, is the trust, interaction, and communication gap that exists between fitness professionals and our medical community. This podcast is all about closing off that gap by disseminating the latest, most evidence-based, and most engaging information in the health sciences. And to do that in episode 108, we're joined by Stacia Root. Now, Stacia is a very interesting story. She started her career as a nurse, an acute care nurse, in fact, and now she's transitioned into the fitness industry as a fitness and an exercise professional. So this is going to be a conversation, one, around why she decided to make that transition, two, the steps that she chose to take to make that transition a reality, and three, the lessons that we all can learn in both the fitness and the healthcare space from the jump she's made and what she's experienced around making this jump from a nurse to a fitness professional. Any information we'd like to share with you from today's episode can be found on the show notes page. It's by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 108. Please enjoy this conversation with Stacia Root. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Stacia Root. Stacia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to do the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. We connected over social media, and you are a former nurse that has transitioned into the fitness field. And that's what a lot of this conversation is going to be around. And I find that super intriguing and very relevant to our audience. But, apart from that little intro that I gave, I'd like you to spend a second just to tell our audience a little bit more about you, to give them some context for our conversation.
Absolutely. I work as a personal trainer now. I work in person at a gym local to where I live, and I've been doing that for the last 2 years. Prior to that, I worked as a registered nurse for about 3 years. I worked in an emergency department, and I also worked in like a kidney cardiac step-down unit, as well as a telephone triage unit as I was transitioning out of nursing into training, because I knew that nursing wasn't for me. So I found a job that wasn't bedside and transitioned into personal training, and absolutely love doing that now.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's what a lot of this conversation is going to be around, is the kind of, your mindset behind, maybe why nursing first, and then why this transition, and then maybe lessons that fitness professionals can learn from you, somebody who's been in both worlds. But also, we do have a lot of healthcare providers that listen to the podcast, maybe some gems you have for them. So I guess, my first question for you is, what got you into nursing? And then the follow-up question will be, what caused you to make the transition from a nurse to a fitness professional?
When I was in high school, I was always interested in doing something in the sports field, working with clients or patients. So I looked at going into athletic training, the hours and the pay, I didn't want that. So I was like, okay, next, physical therapy. At that time, they had just transitioned to getting a doctorate. And I was like, that schooling is not the schedule that I want. Okay, next. And then I was like, oh, nursing seems like a good combination, health and wellness, hours that I like. You can go to school for 4 years, have a bachelor's degree. Seemed like something that would fit into my life and how I wanted it to look. So decided on nursing. And that probably was my number one, should have been a red flag. Like, I'm more sports side, but ended up going into nursing. And going through nursing school, worked in the hospital actually for about 2.5, 3 years as an aide, a teletech, so reading heart rhythms. And when I was doing those jobs, I was like, oh, it's going to get better. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to be a registered. It's going to be better. Like, no thought in my head about I would graduate and end up really disliking the career that I was in. And after I graduated, I started working bedside nursing at a hospital that was a cardiac kidney transplant unit or step down unit. And along the way, I just noticed that we're telling these patients and giving them like sheets of paper on how to take care of your health and wellness. And I'm like, okay, I guess I get it. Our time is limited. We don't have an abundance of time to spend with patients educating on it. But then the same patient comes back a couple times and you start labeling them as non-compliant. And it's like, oh, well, is this us? Or
Mm.
so that started to kind of spark my mind on really what's going on here. And I would say that was maybe 6 months into my nursing career that I was like, this is not what I want to be doing. And it took me a while to figure out that I wanted to go into training. So glad that I found training now, but it definitely took a long time and a lot of self-talk and self-motivation to figure out what I wanted to do.
Yeah, talk about that self-talk and self-motivation for a second, because I think that's an interesting thing to say, because nursing is obviously a very challenging job. You would know better than I and many of the listeners what that's like. But at the same time, it's also a very like stable, predictable career path, right? So like I feel like on some level, you must have been trying to weigh in your mind, like, all right, well, I've got this stable, predictable thing. I know it's going to be here. I know it's going, or I can go be this, fitness professional, which is not necessarily as stable per se. How did you work your way through that psychologically to actually have the courage to make the jump?
At the time that I really was itching to get out of nursing, I had started dating my now husband, and he's very entrepreneurial mindset. So he was extremely helpful and he guided me to go into a career that I liked. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say that I'd come home like 1 to 2 days out of my 3 days of working and like just be in shambles, crying, just upset, just very frustrated. And so he helped push me there, but a lot of it for me was overcoming that, okay, I have a stable career, I have a stable paycheck, I can pick up hours if I need, and being like, okay, now I have to actually I have to do this for myself.
Yeah.
I have to get the clients, I have to make the money. And if I don't get the clients, how am I going to eat? How am I going to pay my truck payment? How am I going to pay my rent? So a lot of that self-talk just came back to, this is what you're passionate about. This is what you're passionate about. And I don't think passion is always something that comes. I think you create your passion. But for me, it was something that I spent, 3 years on. Like, I love my own personal health and wellness. And I knew that the information and education that I had in nursing, I could benefit people working one-on-one with in a gym setting. So a lot of that self-talk and positive thoughts came to the point of, you can actually make a difference on this person's life. And not that I wasn't in nursing, but in personal training, it just seemed like it was a lot more personal and a lot more down to the roots of what the actual cause was. So when I got past all of those negative, like, how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to get food? What are people even going to think? Like, what are my parents going to think? I just paid for school for 4 years. What are my parents going to think? Those were hard. It took me a long time to get through that, 6 to 8 months. And then breaking through that, having a support system of my husband was extremely helpful. But, I think that in that aspect, I also hired a trainer because I wanted to learn how to train from a trainer. So she was also a great support system for me in that transition.
That's great. I mean, a couple of important lessons there. One is that support system is important when you are, making a big jump. But also, too, what I heard in there is, you kind of followed your passion, and a passion is something that emerges. You're obviously earlier in your career. Your passion may shift over time, but you followed it to this step, which I think is I think that's a good lesson for all of us to learn, whether we're in healthcare or fitness or whatever job we're in, is having that good support system and following your passion.
For sure. Yeah. And I, like I said, I think passions are created. I don't think it's something that you like wake up one day and you're like, oh, I'm passionate about doing this. It's something that you create. For me, it was through habits of going to the gym, finding the results that I loved, feeling confident in my body, getting stronger. And it's something I became passionate about, not only for myself, but for other people.
Awesome. Yeah. And again, I think those are super powerful lessons for anyone that's considering any type of a career change. So let's talk a little bit about your perspective from healthcare. And there's a couple different ways to take this. I think the first place I want to take it is just simply based upon being a healthcare provider yourself, being in that environment. What are things that you feel fitness professionals need to know about collaborating with healthcare providers by kind of giving them a look under the hood? I talk about this a lot, but I'm a fitness professional, not a healthcare provider. You come from the healthcare provider word. So what should we know from your perspective as a healthcare provider about collaboration?
I think one of the biggest things, and it's unfortunate, is that it's a system problem. It's not necessarily a person-to-person problem.
Sure.
I think that down to the roots of the education you have, the healthcare system is a business. So the quicker they get patients in, you have to keep your business running. You have to make money. And unfortunately, I think that gets in the way a lot from patient individual health. I can't speak for long-term care. I've only worked acute, in the hospital settings. But from a fitness professional now working at a gym, I would say one of the biggest things is just if you are in the fitness world and you're working in a gym, or even people, have a conversation with someone that that's a doctor. Talk to them. If you see someone in the gym that's a provider or even a nurse, chat with them, have a conversation, see what it's like on the edge of their things, and see kind of what they're lacking or they feel like their patients are coming back with often. Because I think a lot of times, like I said, it's not a person problem. I think it's a system problem. And I have found that most providers and healthcare workers are actually extremely open to have a conversation, but it always comes down to the time. Who has the time to actually come in and sit down and educate these patients in the hospital about diabetes? And I could go on to the food that we feed our patients in the hospital. And it's there's so many aspects that are in the system that I think almost set people up for failure in that way. That's a really strong word and I don't love to use it. But even from my own education, I had one nutrition class as a nurse, and that's fine. I'm not a registered dietitian, but in that nutrition class, I don't really remember anything that I learned there. Everything I've learned has been self-taught now in my industry with different certifications and stuff. But I don't know what it looks like for an MD, how many nutrition classes they go through. But that's a huge one that comes up in my head when I think about it.
Yeah, it is very interesting. It is a business, right? The fact of the matter is, and it's a business that operates off of razor thin margins, at the end of the day. And so, patient volume is really important. Now, you said something that I think is interesting, is that I believe this as well. It's not an individual provider issue. I believe everyone that gets into medicine wants people to be healthy and well, and they want them to flourish, but they're put into this system that makes it hard to do. So with your business thus far, what, if anything, have you tried in terms of collaborating with healthcare professionals? What conversations have you had? What are you doing as someone who's been in that world?
I have some clients that are nurse practitioners, registered nurses, and I always try to chat with them about, hey, this is what I'm taking. I'm bringing it to you, right? And you're learning through now working with me about building muscle. There comes, in my opinion, it comes from a place of you're building muscle, you start feeling better physically. Now, all of a sudden, your mental health can start to follow that a little bit. So I try to talk to them about that. And then I've had some of them say hey, I talked to my patient about this. I think it would be great. And I don't know if a program like this exists, but for providers to actually refer patients to a personal trainer, someone that they trust, someone they know has a background. But those are the conversations that I would like to have. I know the gym that I work out of now is actually connected to a health system. And I believe a provider I don't believe he's there anymore. He used to refer his patients over to trainers where we worked. It's connected right there. Now that patient, instead of saying, hey, go to the gym, they have a name, they have a phone number, they have someone to contact to get them in the gym and get comfortable. So I think that's great. But a lot of the conversations that I have it's personal training. So more personal on a one-on-one level. And then when that person starts to see or feel those results, it makes it a lot easier to share that with patients or people in the healthcare industry. Because if you're not really healthy yourself, I think it's really hard to teach health to other people if you don't actually have a grasp of what healthy means or looks like for you. And healthy doesn't look the same for everyone, but.
I'd like to take a quick break from today's episode to tell you a little bit more about one of our strategic partners as a podcast. As many of you know, the Wellness Paradox is all about closing off the trust, interaction, and communication gap between fitness professionals and the medical community. And no organization does that better than the Medical Fitness Association. They are the professional member association for the medical fitness industry. And this is the industry that integrates directly with healthcare in many facilities throughout the entire country. The MFA is your go-to source for all things medical fitness. They provide newsletters, webinars. They even have standards and guidelines for medical fitness facilities. They do events around the entire country. And most importantly, they are one of the more engaging networks in the entire fitness industry. I personally have benefited from the network that I've developed through the Medical Fitness Association. And I highly recommend that all of you that are interested in solving the wellness paradox engage with the MFA. To find out more about the Medical Fitness Association, you can go to their website, medicalfitness.org. That's medicalfitness.org. Now back to today's episode. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Well, one of the things you said about referral, and I mean, it's a separate, broader conversation, is that, I'll point you and everyone else that's listening out there to the Physical Activity Alliance It's Time to Move initiative. They are working on making, physical activity assessment, prescription, and referral the standard of care in medicine. But, to your point about it being a systematic challenge, is that you have to figure out a way to implement that in the system. I mean, as someone who was in a hospital system, that if it's not in the electronic health records, it's not happening. And there's a lot of challenges around that the Physical Activity Alliance is looking to overcome. So I think for the near term, in the next, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it's probably, professionals such as yourself, working to establish those relationships. So it is a daunting system-wide challenge.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it'd be great. I would love for that to happen where people have referrals, because how intimidating is it for someone that's never been to the gym to walk into a gym when you get a piece of paper that says, hey, for, this condition, we need you to work out 3 times a day. They're probably never going to walk into the gym.
Yeah, right.
That's not really something that most people are going to do unless they have like a point of contact and someone that's holding them accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And there's all kinds of challenges with that. Let's switch gears for a second here. I'm gonna step out of healthcare and step kind of into, what you've done recently, because I think there's a lot of good lessons to be learned from people who, transition careers into this as a business, and they start a successful, personal training business, because a lot of people try, and more often than not, people fail. It's a very hard thing to do, and I'm sure you've experienced some of the challenges. I'm curious if you could share with the audience maybe some of your, secrets to success or best practices. What are things that you have done to go from making a stable career and paycheck in nursing to now a stable career and paycheck in personal training? Because that didn't happen by accident. So what are some lessons you might have to share?
I would say the biggest thing is that for me, fitness is not one size fits all. I think that a lot of trainers get really caught up in, what sells, which people buy the 12-week programs. It's a one size fits all program, 12 weeks. This is what it looks like. And for me, I take it more on a personal approach. Every single person is different. What their habits and workouts and eating looks like is going to vary person to person. And thankfully for me, I'm very thankful for this. I have a nursing background. So I had a huge background going into it in health and wellness, in anatomy, how the body moves, how it works, things like that. So that was great. I think anyone in healthcare that wants to transition into the fitness world, I mean, you're already 3 steps ahead because you have that background. Along with that, though, comes continuing education. Because if you don't know, like if I got a client that came in and was like, I've had 2 hip replacements and I had no idea what I was doing, prescribed them something wrong and they got hurt, chances they come back is low. Oh. So I would say the different things I do is I just take a very personal approach in it. I want to get to know you. I want to get to know your habits and help you build healthier habits in your day that are also sustainable, because anyone can do anything for a short period of time, but you can't force everyone to do that forever. Mm-hmm. Your day is not going to look like my day, just like my day is not going to look like your day. Back to the healthy thing. Healthy looks different for every single person. And I really try to communicate that with clients and just let them know that I'm here to help them develop healthy habits for their life. Husband and wife, it will look completely different, but it's for them personally. And I think that a lot of times as personal trainers, when you're trying to make it, it's very simple to do what sells, which is 12-week programs. You see it and it's like the shiny new thing, 12 weeks, I'm going to lose this much weight. But actually taking it to a personal level, like I love talking to people. I love getting to know people and just figuring out how we can fit fitness and wellness into their life.
Yeah, the health looks different for everyone, I think is a really interesting statement. And yeah, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I'm going to ask the question. It seems like on some level, what you're saying there is like health is not all about the number on the scale or the way you look in the mirror. Is that kind of where you're going? And if so, expand on that, because I feel like that's what a lot of fitness professionals focus on, is what you look like in the mirror or that number on the scale.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about, because one person at 150 pounds will look exactly different than another person at 150 pounds. And even if we look at BMI charts, you look at those charts, you can look at a man who's 6 foot, 220 pounds, and has a six pack, and they're saying that he's obese.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at those things and it's like, okay, what? That doesn't make any sense at all. So an approach I like to take with my clients is I do like to have people weigh in initially, because for calculations for macros, things like that, food, we like to have a baseline. But that's not the number we focus on. We're focusing on how you look, how you feel, how are clothes feeling, how's your energy, is your sleep better? All of those things that are, I would say, more of a healthy direction, they're not going to look the same for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, someone like a 6 foot, 225 pound man that has a six pack of abs, the healthcare system is going to label as obese. And it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. You also talked about habits, which I do want to kind of just drill down on for a second, because I think habits are an interesting concept. How do you go about fostering that with your clients? Because I think we all agree, like, hey, you should develop healthy habits. You should develop healthy habits. But doing that is actually the challenge. So what is your approach or your paradigm around habit formation for your clients?
I typically will start with something, we'll sit down and talk. And if it's something like they're not getting enough water in, which is pretty typical, most people do not consume enough water when they come and talk to me. So we'll talk about adding in just an extra 16 ounces to start with. Mm-hmm. Just start small, add extra 16 ounces. I have them check it off. In like the app system that I use for my clients, I put it in their calendar. So at the end of the day, they check it off, but we start extremely small, because if you start huge, the chances of you succeeding are lower. You know, you can change. If you're saying, oh, I want to wake up earlier, and you're waking up at 8 a.m. and now you're waking up at 4 a.m., the chances of you succeeding at that long term are pretty low, unless you're, you know, a low percentage, I would say. So I start with small changes that lead them in the right direction. And then when they're consistently doing that, we make another step and then another step. And then at that point in time, they're proving to themselves that, hey, I can complete this. Hey, I am checking this off. It's almost like positive self-talk for them then, in a sense, where they feel like they're able to week to week, day to day.
Yeah, it is those baby steps. One thing that is curious is that, you know, obviously you've done a lot of learning around, you know, fitness and behavior change and nutrition, it sounds like. And to your point, like, you had one nutrition class in undergrad as a nurse. I'm assuming you probably didn't have a lot of coaching health behavior change classes in undergrad. So where have you gone? What have been some useful resources and educational tools that you have accessed to develop some of these skills that you needed that you didn't have from your nursing curriculum?
For personal training, I'm ISSA certified. And ISSA has a ton of information, ton of certifications you can get, ton of extra classes you can get. So that's where I went for that education, a lot of personal training education. A lot of the person-to-person interaction that I have with clients has just come from working with people for, 6 years now, between nursing and personal training. And just learning how to communicate. A lot too for me comes from listening to podcasts like Ed Milet, Andy Frisella, some of those bigger podcasts I really enjoy listening to take little nuggets out of for habits, things like that. So podcasts for me are huge. The basically the certification that I got to be a personal trainer, they have so many continuing ed credits. I'm going to actually a seminar here at the end of September as well, or a conference, which I'll get a ton more education. So I try to stay well studied on those things, but working with people is something that I picked up in nursing, and reading people, having really hard conversations simply came from like a healthcare background, I think.
Yeah, interesting. So a couple things sound true. One, you've gone out and you've sought out, you know, formal education, but it sounds like partly it's just your desire to keep learning, A, and then B, your experience and continuing to develop your soft skills, and your interpersonal skills as much as your prescription skills. I mean, I heard you talk about the difficult conversations and things like that. Like, it seems as if that's only something that can be developed by experience. You're not going to get that from a textbook.
For sure. If I wouldn't have worked in nursing, I would have been so incredibly awkward talking to people at first, I think. And it just came in nursing. You have to talk to people. You don't have an option. Like, you have to talk to people. You have hard conversations with patients, with family members, even with other coworkers. So a lot of those skills were just from experience doing it. And they get, over time, you get more and more and more advanced in it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting perspective. So the other thing I want to get your perspective on is, for the healthcare professionals that are looking for this or listening to this, maybe there are some people that are intrigued by your journey and say, wow, that'd be a cool thing for me to consider. Maybe not jumping in all the way like you did. I mean, obviously that's a big step to take, but some people may be ready. Other people just may want to dip their toe in the water. Two things. One, what would you say to those people that might be interested in, maybe making this transition? And then if they were interested, what would be the first couple things you'd recommend they do?
First off, you are already 3 steps ahead because of your health background. You have knowledge of the human body, which, we are working, personal training is working with the human body. It's just on a different field. So you already are steps ahead. And if it's something that you're interested in, I think that's wonderful. In that regard, step 2, I would say, for me, I hired a trainer because I wanted to learn how trainers trained, and I wanted to see what her life looked like. Her and I actually are great friends now after I was training with her. But for me, I learned so much just by working with her. I learned about the gym setting. I learned how to coach clients in the gym. I learned what certifications I should get, which ones I shouldn't. All of those questions were answered by a professional. And I don't think you should just go to the gym and pick out a random trainer. I think you should actually do your research on the trainers that you want to work with and maybe learn from. Because, the fact is, it's pretty easy to become a certified personal trainer. And there are some people that really don't have business being in the industry. So if you're learning from someone that doesn't have business being in the industry, I think that's setting you up for more of a failure than anything. So do your research on your trainers, hire a trainer, talk to a trainer. Most of us we love people. We literally work with people every day. So we're very open to conversations, and we get very excited when someone's like, hey, I want to get into the fitness field. Like, awesome. Can't wait.
So I'm curious, and what you said, I think, is very accurate. Like, you went and you got a trainer, and you just didn't choose any trainer, but you found one that, resonated with you and you thought could help you succeed. What was it that made you choose the trainer that you chose? I think that's an important insight to get out of this conversation. How did somebody who wanted to become a trainer, who was a healthcare provider, pick their own trainer? What was it?
Honestly, she was aesthetically pleasing. Like, what she looked like, I was like, wow, I can tell you work out. I can tell you put yourself first. She was very strong. I like to lift weights, considering doing a powerlifting competition. And she's like a national power lifter, and just happened to be in the gym that I worked out at. And she came up to me one day and we started talking, and I was like, I'm going to hire her because the way she spoke was extremely intelligent. The way she lifted was like I wanted a trainer who pushed themselves and took their fitness and nutrition seriously. And after a conversation with her, it was very evident that she did. And it just clicked. Like, there was no other trainer that I had ever been with that I was like, or even seen that I was like, yes, I want to work with you, or I'm interested in learning from you. She was just so qualified that I felt like, wow, I can't wait to be working with you for 12 weeks and figure out what I can learn just from working with you.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious about something. So you guys met in the gym and you started talking. Who did you ask her to train you, or was it the other way around?
So she came up to me and just asked if I was like a power lifter or bikini girl. And we chatted for a little bit, and I was like, okay, she's a newer trainer at this gym. I hadn't seen her before, but it was kind of open-ended after we chatted. And then I came home, told my husband, I was like, I'm hiring that girl. So went back to the gym. Actually, pretty sure I approached her in the locker room and I was like, how do I sign up for training with you? I was just like so amped to get started. So
that's great. Yeah, I asked that for a specific reason, because most successful personal trainers, build a relationship first, and then training comes from that. So it sounds like, she didn't do the hard sale, like, hey, you really need to train with me if you want to get results. She just talked to you. You developed a little bit of a relationship, and then ultimately you kind of sold yourself. And I think that that's a really, really important lesson to take out of that for all the trainers that are listening.
For sure. Absolutely. Because I really don't like to be hard. Like if she tried to sell me, I would have been like, I'm good.
Yeah. Right.
And it's at that point in time, it kind of takes the personal aspect out of it, which it is personal training. It's personal for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Stacia, where can people go if they want to find out more about you and all the great work you're doing?
So I'm very active on my social medias, Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is just Stacia Root. So STACIA ROOT. And then Facebook, same thing. Very responsive to messages. I'd love to chat with you. Like I said, I love talking to people and meeting new people. So would absolutely love to start a conversation.
Awesome. And we will link up to those on the show notes page so everyone has access to them. Before I let you go, I'll end the podcast with you on the question I end every podcast on. And I always love to ask this to people with healthcare backgrounds, because you as a group have some of the biggest insights. And this is, I consider the wellness paradox, the trust, interaction, and communication gap that exists between fitness professionals and the medical community. As someone who kind of has one foot in both worlds, if you could give the fitness professionals that are listening one piece of advice as to how to close off that gap, what would it be?
I would say communicate with the people that that are providers. Start a conversation. Find out what they have on their day-to-day or what their day-to-day looks like with patients, because it helps you at least understand what's going on in that world. Like I said, it's a system problem, and I think it needs to be fixed all the way back at the roots with education way down the road. But those conversations that you have with a doctor, a nurse practitioner, even a registered dietitian that comes into the gym, that open communication is step one, because open communication leads to maybe more ideas, more referrals for you if you're, they like what they're seeing and they're able to refer some patients over to you.
Awesome. Communication indeed. Stacia Root, thank you so much for joining us on the Wellness Paradox.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you found it insightful and informative, please share with your friends and colleagues. Those shares make a big difference to us. Any information we'd like to share with you from today's episode can be found on the show notes page. That's by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 108. Please be on the lookout for our next episode when it drops in 2 weeks. And don't forget to subscribe through your favorite podcast platform. Until we chat again next, please be well.